Well, hello. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. I'm Lynn Gross, a producer here at KPCC In Person. How are we doing tonight? Great. We are so happy to have you guys here to talk about arts education. From previous events, we have learned the importance of arts education in the classroom. And tonight, we're going to tackle just how do we pay for it. In case you didn't know, KPCC and Eliast is a news organization, and we produce events just like the one tonight. We actually have an event coming up on Wednesday at the Tate Uchi Democracy Forum in downtown LA. If you would like more information on this event or any of our other events, feel free to visit us at kpcc.org/inperson. Also, if you're welcome to sign up for our newsletter in the lobby. Just a few things before we get started. We are also going to be doing some stuff. You may have noticed the sign-up sheet on your chair. That is a Connect with KPCC sign-up sheet. This allows us to reach out to you about events and topics that you feel that you're an expert on. We are also going to be live streaming, so we ask that you do not audio and video record. We also are okay with pictures. We just ask that you do not use flash. And if you could silence your phones, that would be great. For those of you who are on social, you can feel free to use the hashtag ArtsEd. I think that about covers it. Without further ado, your host, arts education reporter, Carla Javier.
Hi there. Thank you for coming out here for this conversation tonight. I'm actually really excited about it because it's a conversation that's largely informed by past conversations we've had here. Like Lynn was saying, we've had conversations here. I've hosted them about arts and the juvenile justice system, about arts and ethnic studies. We had one where teachers were just telling us different stories about the arts really helping them connect with particular students in their class. And every time we have a Q&A, just like the one we'll have later today, an opportunity for folks like you to ask questions. And nearly every time someone's, said, but okay, how do you pay for that? Or I'm not sure if my school would be able to support that. How did you make it happen at your school? So that's why we're here today to talk about those things with a panel of experts who do this work each and every day, who come from different school districts, different schools, to kind of give you a perspective of different ways that these challenges are tackled. And the reason why I think now is a really good time to have this conversation is, school funding in general has been a big part of the discussion this school year, not just the arts, but really in general. Front of mind for me, I'm thinking of Measure EE and LA Unified. Before that, the teacher strike. Before that, in November, there were some parcel taxes on the ballots to support schools in districts around Southern California. And given all the demands on schools and their budgets already, how do districts and schools pay for the arts? That's what we're talking about today. We decided to dedicate this whole conversation to those questions, and I hope as they pop up in your head, as we have these conversations, you keep them, because we're going to have a Q&A just like before, where you can ask those questions and really get answers. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, an artist, a student, staff, administrator, I hope there's something you can learn here today, either from the panel or from the folks you're sitting with. This is a whole group of people who came here to have this conversation. We want to convene it and have it together. For me, for example, I've learned a lot after I became the arts education reporter here at our station. And I know there's always more to learn, more resources, more things to kind of connect with. So I just wanted to provide an example to give us a launching point. When I moved to California, I saw these license plates everywhere. Those license plates, actually. The arts plates. I thought, they were cool. They look California. You got the the ocean and the trees up there. And it wasn't until later on in having conversations with folks like you that I learned that this is one of the ways that our state, our California Arts Council, actually raises money for arts education. So now when I'm driving around and I see those plates, I know that that's $35. That person paid $35 to support the arts in schools, or maybe they just liked the plate. And altogether, that comes up to over $2 million each year for arts education in our state. But of course, those license plates are not the only way that arts are in schools are paid for here in California. Since more than half of K-12 school funding comes from the state, I figured we could start our conversation there. The state Senate and Assembly have passed next year's over $214 billion spending plan. Over $100 billion of that is set aside for K-12 education. And to help put that in context, I'd actually like to invite up our first guest, Mark Slavkin. While Mark is making his way up, he's currently the Director of Education at the Wallace Annenberg Center for Performing Arts and a longtime advocate for education and arts education. Before that, he served in a number of positions, including at the Music Center and on the LA School Board. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so new budget over $100 billion for K-12 education. That, to me, sounds like a lot of money. Is it?
Well, it is and it isn't. By the standards of what any of us would make in a lifetime, it's more than a lot of money.
Sure.
But to the extent that are we paying at or more than the other 49 states per child, then it's not enough money. California continues to lag behind the national average by about $2,000 per student. And that's a core kind of structural problem that's a result of something called Prop 13 that was passed in 1978 that caps property taxes. So property taxes in California are a much smaller share of school funding than in other states. We're reliant on our state government to pick up the tab, a large share of the tab, almost 60%. So we have a structural problem that really isn't going to get fixed without a structural change. It'll go up and down as state revenues are better this year, and that's great. We're not going to fix it unless we revisit Prop 13, and there's a ballot measure on the November state ballot coming up, 2020, that will change the way commercial property is reassessed to generate significant additional money, part of which will support schools. So it's not just California's weird. We, the voters, made choices in 1978 that have hampered our schools ever since. The good news is there's now some awareness and hopefully some momentum to try to change that.
I want to get back to kind of bigger education funding in a second, but I want to just zoom in on the topic for today, which is the arts. And so, when someone picks up the budget that was just passed by the legislature, are they going to see like a line item for arts education on that budget?
Not a lot. I mean, the relationship that the state government has with local school districts is not to fund subject by subject. So it's not that each district gets an English budget, a math budget, a Spanish budget, and a band budget. School districts get a global budget determined largely by the enrollment, how many kids they serve, and the type of kids in terms of their challenges. And school districts, board members, superintendents, and school principals are making choices of how to allocate that. So the California Arts Council, which you referenced, that collects the license plate, and some other money. There's a line item for the Arts Council. That's fantastic. It's less than 0.00000001 of what it would take to deliver K-12 arts education. So that support is largely symbolic and mostly supports nonprofit cultural institutions, which is wonderful, but it's not a substitute for better public funding overall of school budgets.
And then when it comes to funding the arts in schools, you're kind of referring to the fact that this money is given, it's under local control, right? That districts can determine what they spend it on. Has it always been that way, or has there been a time when arts education has been more specifically called out in budgets or in support?
For the most part, it hasn't been called out. An exception was around 2004, 2005, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor. And he led an effort to write a new line item into the budget that was providing initially $105 million a year for arts education, where every district got a grant based on its enrollment and an additional amount for physical education. And that was a good thing, and I think in some communities jump-started a new conversation about how we can advance the arts. The danger of it is I don't want the arts to be limited by a line item, or limited, more importantly, by an attitude that the arts are dependent on charity. That attitude is getting in our way, so that principals, albeit with limited resources, who don't hesitate to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on new math textbooks or lots of money for professional development in language arts, when it comes to talking about the arts sometimes, suddenly they get a little teary. Well, you know, there's not really money to do that, even though there was money to do other things. So if we're waiting for the art fairy to come and give us a line item, I think that's a long wait. I think, and we're going to see tonight from lots of great folks who are here, that in spite of all the challenges and inadequate funding, there are school districts and principals up and down the state every day who are making the value proposition that the arts deserve to be supported and expanded in my school or in my district, and that's happening. So money will always be a challenge, but the bigger barrier is attitude, and the bigger barrier is acceptance of a status quo that we've all gotten a little used to, that I guess it's not, quote, realistic to deliver the arts for all of our kids. It has to be realistic, it has to be mandated, it has to be enforced. We have to change the discussion to be one about how urgently can we provide the arts for all kids, and move away from whether or not it's a good idea.
Well, it's interesting to me that you say that, because I'm curious, arts education is literally written into California's education code. It's their, visual and performing arts. So when you're talking about an attitude change, I'm curious what kind of change you've seen kind of in your time advocating for education, and what you think would need to be done to change that attitude, more so than policy or more so than money.
Great question. What I see time and again is an aha moment that's live and in person for a principal or an assistant superintendent, district superintendent, or school board member to change their attitude about the arts. We sometimes think that it's about research studies and all of that, and there's a place for that. But in my experience, it means being in the room when quality arts teaching is going on, looking at the extent to which kids are engaged, looking to the extent at which they're thinking critically and acting with innovation and creativity to solve a problem. And for a lot of us, duh, that's what the arts are. For many people, that's a new idea, that they saw the arts as enrichment as opposed to instruction. They saw the arts as decorative as opposed to substantive. And they haven't had that lived experience of being in an art classroom or somewhere where arts integration is happening and seeing quality teaching and learning. So I've been present just so many times where that light bulb goes off, they go back to their desk or back to the school board and say, we've got to change this. And the same district that had no money on Monday to support the arts program, on Tuesday found several $1 million in order to invest. So I don't want us to get hung up on there's no money and therefore we can't do it. The bigger barrier is attitude. It's attitude about why the arts matter, and its attitude about why the arts matter for kids who are struggling the most. And I think right now in California, that's our biggest barrier. There are those who believe that kids who are doing really poorly in school need nonstop remediation in math and language arts. And it's art stuff, which is so fun and so engaging, and they're laughing. We can't risk those kids having that experience, because it's somehow going to take them off track for their remediation and gaining basic proficiency. And that becomes so self-fulfilling. More drudgery, more remediation, more drill and kill. Kids are turned off, acting out, leaving school. The arts are not a magic potion, but they can be an important part of the solution of making school worth attending and giving kids a chance to believe that their voice matters.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was issues of equity. And I think that's something that you're alluding to now. The Los Angeles Arts Ed Collective did a profile of the districts here in LA County, which I have a copy of on my desk and I look at a lot when I'm thinking about the stories that I do for our station. And one of their findings was that, I'm just going to read it, schools with a larger share of English learners, more students eligible for free and reduced price meals, which they use as a proxy for low income, and more students of color tend to have less arts instruction, and it's of lower quality for those students. These are the kinds of communities that you're talking about who you seem to think would benefit from this. But they're also the kinds of communities that can't necessarily fundraise their way out of the problem.
Right. But they're school communities that have the most cash on hand. So in our lowest performing schools, cash is not their biggest issue. In fact, spending all the money before the end of the fiscal year becomes a challenge for a lot of schools.
Can I just get you to back up a second, explain
yeah.
why that might seem counterintuitive
It
to
does
someone
seem
who's...
counterintuitive. Schools in low-income communities that have parents with very little resource are not able to raise money and are not able to have a bake sale and are not having a booster club and are not doing a lot of those things. And those schools are eligible, because of the needs of the kids that they serve, for a variety of supplemental funding streams that come to that school in the interest of helping close those disparities. So federal Title I money is intentionally provided for schools serving kids in poverty to help overcome those barriers and those gaps. But there are state programs for kids now who are English language learners, programs for kids with disabilities. So cash isn't the problem. They're often receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars on a single campus. And yet, the barrier is the attitude belief, a sense that either I'll get in trouble if I use money on the arts because somebody told me that's not allowed, or this idea that's born in empathy and born, I think, in positive intent, that somehow our kids who are struggling so much in school can't afford to lose a minute in their day to this art stuff. And I think that comes from a lack of knowledge about what quality arts programs look like. And when you sit down with that principal or those teachers, say, well, tell me about your challenge. Say, Mark, our kids don't have academic vocabulary. They're struggling to learn English. They don't speak with confidence. They read robotically, but they don't have deep comprehension. That's what we need to work on. The idea that a theater program could be exactly what those kids need to care about what they read, to have a reason to speak up and be heard, it's just not front of mind for people. It hasn't been their experience. So it's not people have poor ill will. All the intent is there. They have a lack of prior knowledge about how the arts are part of that solution. So when we think about advancing the arts, I want us to think about all the sources of funding that schools have to serve their students and not believe that we need to stay in the lane called arts education and be limited to what somebody told us is eligible money for the arts from a special grant, from a special donation, whatever it is. That's lovely. But every dollar coming into that school, within reason, should be part of the conversation about how the arts fit as part of a strategy to make our schools better.
And can I just get you, because it'll help set the stage for the rest of this conversation, to talk about what those funnels of money are that schools get that maybe could be used towards the arts?
Gets a little wonky. Thanks to Jerry Brown, we've moved away from a lot of very narrow categorical programs to lump money together and to give it to school districts in something called the local control funding formula. So it's based on the total enrollment in your district, and also there's additional money for kids who are homeless, kids who are in foster youth, kids who are learning English as a second language. That's the main source of money that comes from the state. Then there's federal money, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, all of those as part of the federal education law that are organized in different ways. So there's something called Title IV that's for whole child education, and we're now seeing districts around the state using some of those funds to help strengthen their arts program.
And I'm just going to interrupt you for a second because I think we have a chart that'll help for people who are visual people like me visualize what Mark's talking about right now. Okay, so you've talked about local control funding formula. I've talked about federal money, which is up there. I'm seeing a couple other things. We have it in front of us too.
Oh, thank you. I hurt my neck. Yeah, I mean, you could slice each of these into 100 little slices, and there's categorical funding and paperwork and rules that come with it, so I don't want to lose people in all of that. Other than to say, state money, federal money, local property tax income to districts where they have the greatest discretion in some ways because there aren't strings attached. But all of these funding sources are intended so that kids have a quality education. That's the point of all of it. And as advocates for the arts, we need to see ourselves part of the conversation, not just in the arts meeting. We need to be in the dropout meeting. We need to be in the support for English language learner meeting. We need to be in the how do we get parents more involved and more engaged meeting. That the arts need to be at those tables, and when you have those conversations, you find people in the district say, oh, well, we have $5 million from that fund. We could use part of that. We have money for professional development. We hadn't thought of using it to integrate the arts. That often, again, it's not the dollars as the barrier, it's the silos that we have in school systems and the belief that the arts live outside core instruction. And that gets in our way so many times. So it's our role as advocates, not just to advocate for the arts as a thing, but advocate for kids. That's really the point. And think about all the people in a district and at school who serve kids. How can the arts, together with everything else, again, be part of the solution? I don't believe it's a magic bullet that just 5 minutes of art and your test scores double and your brain gets bigger. But I do know and believe deeply it is so often part of the solution. It's so often the way that kids feel that they matter, their voice matters, somebody cares what they have to say. There's not always just a single right answer they have to memorize. And if we can turn the pivot schools so that kids feel that valuing, then I think anything is possible across the entire curriculum.
And then before I let you go off the stage, Mark, so from the state, we'll talk about the state money. Where does that money go? How help us follow it through in conversation?
Well, there are only 1,026 school districts in California, 58 counties. So money flows to counties that have a kind of oversight role through the County Office of Education, flows to each district based on its enrollment and the type of kids it serves. We talked a little bit about that. Now flows to about 1,200 charter schools that are also entitled to funding based on their enrollment. And along the way, there are different decision makers, school boards, superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals. More and more districts are giving schools greater discretion over their school budget. And often schools have a committee called a site council or shared decision-making council. They have different names, where parents, teachers, principals together are making choices. So at each point of that process, people are making decisions about what matters. And the tension that we need to balance is between local control, where teachers have autonomy, that's important. Schools have flexibility, that's important. But the flexibility and the autonomy needs to be about how we teach the arts, not whether we teach the arts. We've allowed it to be whether or not. We've allowed teachers to say, I'm not comfortable, I'm not going to do it. Principals to say, that's not my thing, and I'm not allocating funds for a new music teacher. Districts say, we have one award-winning high school, that's enough, we're not going to fund a robust arts program. Those decisions are not, that's not okay in terms of local control or flexibility. How you do it, what will work in detailed, granular form, school to school, the people closest to it have that answer. But it can't be whether or not you do it. We wouldn't allow schools to say, you know what, we don't teach math anymore here. We tried it, just didn't fit our community. We don't do math. That would be a 60-minute story right the next day. That's a scandal. That happens every day of the week across the state in classrooms, school sites, and districts that say, we're just not into it. We don't have the money. We're under pressure to do these other things. We're doing the best we can. And all of us have accepted that for too long. So I think the new thing is a greater urgency to say, you know what, these kids don't have 20 or 50 years to wait. We need to demand a remedy right now to say that's not okay and educate people at each part of that flow of the money to say you can't opt out. You've got to invest, and we're going to help you do it wisely, but you can't make a choice that it's not for all of our kids.
Thank you so much, Mark, for
Thank you
talking
for having
that.
me. Thank you for doing that.
And one of the reasons why I had Mark talk through that flow of money is that's the same structure that we're going to have for this conversation today. I don't have somebody from a county office of education, but I do have two folks from two districts in California. I'm going to invite them up now and introduce you to them while I talk about them. Lauren Shelton is the Visual and Performing Arts Coordinator at Chula Vista Elementary School District down by San Diego. And Dr. Jeff Lagazzino is Director of Learning Support Services, Assessment, Technology at Mountain View School District in El Monte. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Really briefly, Jeff, I'll start with you. Can you just give us a brief description of your district? You know, kind of tell us a bit about the students, how big or small it is, so we can understand context.
So we're a small declining enrollment district in El Monte, California, which is about 30 minutes from here. K-8. We have 10 elementary schools and 2 middle schools, 64% English learners, and then above 90% are what you referenced earlier as the Title I population based off the free and reduced lunch.
Right. And then, Lauren, can I get you to also tell us about your school districts? We have context for
Sure.
you.
So the Chula Vista Elementary School District is the largest K-6 district in the state of California. We serve 30,000 students at 46 school sites, and we are separated by the 805 freeway. Our west side of the freeway is more of our urban communities with our lower socioeconomic status schools, which are Title I status. And then on the east side of our freeway, we have our schools that are more suburban with non-Title I schools.
And the reason why I wanted Jeff and Lauren to introduce that right now is I tried to pick them because they have very different districts. And they also tackle the arts in interesting ways at their districts. So Jeff, you aren't necessarily like a VAPA coordinator. You have other things along your title. You have other things you do in your job. So I wanted to ask you about what your district offers when it does come to the arts and how you've been able to support that.
So it's really grown in the last 4 years with the advent of the local control funding formula that Mark talked about, receiving more monies for our students that are vulnerable and need programs, a variety of different programs and experiences that these funds afford us to provide to them. But initially, our program started off with some artist residencies in second grade that were every other year. So if you were in half the schools in second grade in a particular year, you got an artist residency in puppetry. If you were in the other half of the schools, you didn't get that residency. And so then the next year, the other half of the schools would get it. So we were always missing kids, and it was just one grade level. At the middle school, we've always had an arts program, a visual arts program at both campuses, and then also a band program. But then you're also limited in the structure of the middle school day. There's only 6 periods, and so students are making a choice whether they're going to participate in the arts or not because they only get one elective. So that's where we started. Over the last 4 years, we've expanded those artist residencies to include all of our grades, TK through 6. We made an intentional effort to provide different experiences in the arts. So we cover theater, dance, music, and visual arts are typically provided by the teacher. But we've also, we're now looking into expanding into 7th and 8th grade next year with media arts as strategy-based to infuse into any of the content areas so that it's not dependent on whether you chose to have an elective or not in the arts.
And is that something that is supported by at the school board level, at the superintendent level, or is it a fight to get the arts in your schools?
So our superintendent is probably the biggest advocate for arts. I mean, she is always mentioning arts is the core, is part of the core. It's not an extra. So we have that support. And I think as our artist residencies grew, initially, I think some board members may have thought that we were receiving more funds each year, and it's like they're seeing a lot of funds going towards visual and performing arts, and maybe we're questioning, but once you see the engagement of the students in the classroom, in these programs, the excitement of the teachers to be a participant in these programs, and they're learning alongside the visiting artists, and implementing strategies after the artist residency is no longer at the school site. Once you see that in action, then you can't help but be a supporter of these programs. You see how much they help our students.
And speaking of districts that support the arts, I mean, Lauren, your district has made a huge commitment to the arts. Can you describe that for us?
Sure. So 10 years ago, I was a new programs manager for the San Diego Youth Symphony and Conservatory. And we decided to, okay, let's go and see why we are not representing all of San Diego County in our orchestras. We'll go to the South Bay because only 3% of the student population is coming from the South Bay. And once we went down there to try to figure out, okay, why can't we get your students to audition to our orchestra? We realized that they didn't have any elementary music programs or elementary arts programs, period. And so we then decided to shift our thinking, and we started the Community Opus Project, which was an after-school program with only 75 students at 2 school sites. And we basically use that as our tool to advocate in the district the importance of music education. This was right when Title I was starting to come out and the funding that could be used for arts education. And so, the Title I priorities are student engagement, getting parents on campus, making sure that the community has a voice in how you are funding school priorities. And we started to follow the students with their test scores. With the students that were not in the program, we noticed that the students that were in the Opus project scored way higher than their peers in their state testing. And so we started using it as that advocacy tool. The principals noticed that, wow, we've got so many parents on campus all the time because we always invited them into the music classroom and come and see what your child is learning. So we really started to make that part of the process. And fast forward to the point where the local control funding formula came to be, and the district said, okay, we need to figure this out. And they invested $5 million a year in the LCAP to say, all right, we're just going to go big or go home, and every child is going to receive arts education. So we went from 0 full-time arts teachers to 68 in 3 months. So when Mark was talking about the attitude, it really is priorities. We utilize it as a priority for every child in our district. It's important to us, and so we say, okay, we're going to utilize our LCAP funding to make sure that our students all have this opportunity.
And talking about LCAP funding, it's something that I've talked to both of you about before, kind of how you integrate the arts into your plans. Jeff, maybe I'll have you start to talk about what LCAP is for folks who don't know, and then what role arts has in your LCAP process.
So the LCAP stands for Local Control Accountability Plan. It's written at the district level, and so it's how you're going to use those supplemental and concentration funds that your students generate to be able to provide what services, actions, and services you're going to provide to them for that next school year. And to tell you the truth, when I started in my position, I have the longest title in the district, and so I tend to shorten it now to I'm Director of Fund plus Assessment. Don't really like that part of it, but so when I was given an opportunity that my predecessor had started, was this idea of the artist residency with the shadow puppetry, and he had applied for additional funding from the Arts Ed Collective and to expand that program. And so when I looked at it, well, I got the email on the day that it was due and so I looked at it and I was like, wow, it's like, puppetry is great, and I love the program as a principal when I had it every other year on my site. And so I was glad to see that it was going to expand fully through second grade with the support of LCAP funding. And then the request for additional funding to seed the next grade levels was to add puppetry to third and fourth grade. And I thought, wow, that's really very narrow. And there's so much more with visual and performing arts. And so I contacted the Arts Ed Collective and I said, is it possible for us to change this plan so that we can explore other avenues? And so that year, we were able to add music for fourth grade and then dance for third grade. So that really started us off on this idea of we had to have a plan. And the Arts Ed Collective even told me, you have an old strategic plan. Once you get once you're more grounded in your new position, we need to talk about, let's, look at redoing your plan or revising it so that it's more current. And through that process, we identified the opportunity to be able to have artist residencies TK through 6, which we rolled out slowly each year as we were receiving additional funds from the state.
And Lauren, you mentioned support to the tune of $5 million in your LCAP. What kinds of things are you saying at the district level in that plan are being supported with the arts?
Sure. We've actually bumped that up to now $7.2 million a year. And that's supporting about 100 visual and performing arts teachers throughout the district. And so our VAPA strategic plan basically is focusing on sequential standards-based art education, which is your music, theater, dance, visual art, and media arts teachers. And then we also have a section of our plan that focuses on arts integration as part of the general classroom teacher instruction. So we utilize these funds to provide every child in our district, TK through 6th grade, at least 2 arts teachers every week. it can be between, some of our sites are smaller, so they see 2 teachers 45 minutes a week, each teacher. And then our other school sites will see 4 to 5 teachers for 45 minutes a session a week. So it really just depends. But the funding that we utilize through the LCAP makes it possible for all of our teachers to be in our district.
And then something I wanted to ask both of you is, you're at the district level, and there are, in your districts, I'm sure there are, artists, there are arts partners, community arts organizations, really passionate parents, teachers. If somebody cares about having the arts in their district, either for their students or whoever, what would you advise them to do? How would you advise them to kind of make that argument to support it at the level that you are at?
Want to go ahead?
Well, part of the LCAP process annually is that districts have open forums for community input. And so it's a review of what projects and programs have been implemented for that school year, what evidence is there that they are working, but then also an opportunity for the community to say what did they like seeing that was implemented, and what would they like to see more of, what would they like us to consider revising. So I would say get involved in those community forums, because that's where we take all of we have extensive surveys and charting, and we have a data team that gets together every year and looks at all of that input, and that's how we make our decisions on new programming for the new year.
And in our district, we have the Hanover Survey that is sent out to every parent, teacher, student, anybody who's a partner in our district, and they fill out what is the most exciting thing that we have in our district, what do they want more of, and for the last 3 years that we've done the survey, the visual and performing arts has been the #1. So nobody wants to cut that if we know that that's what our parents and communities and students want. And so anytime I have an opportunity to talk to a group of parents, I make myself available, just because they need to understand that it's their voice that's the most powerful voice in any room with our decision makers in our district. And it's also, if you have 10 parents in a room with a principal, the principal's going to need to listen, because you are the ones that are, you're the community members that have a really strong voice in what you want for your child's education. So it really takes the parents to say, this is what we demand and this is what we want for our children.
And I see you nodding too, Jeff.
I do exactly the same thing. I get these opportunities to go out to see culminations for our artist residencies, and we have an auditorium full of parents there to see their kids perform. And I'm often asked to do an introduction, but I always make sure that I mention to them, this is because of your support and coming to those community forums and saying that this is the type of programming that you want for your students. And it's because of the LCAP and because of their input that we have these programs for their kids.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to continue following the money. We started at the state, we got to the district. Now we're going to bring you to the school site, to the school. So I would like to invite a group of folks to talk from that perspective. Judy Hessian is principal at Joaquin Miller Elementary in Burbank. Debbie Winstein is one of the teachers at that school. She teaches kindergarten. And then joining them is Sandra Montijo from the Burbank Arts for All Foundation, where she's program outreach manager. The Burbank Arts for All Foundation, we'll talk about it more in a second, is a community organization that's supportive arts initiatives at the school where Judy and Debbie work. So welcome them. I welcome them. And you do too. So, Judy, I'll talk to you first, the same way we did with Lauren and Jeff. Can you just give a short introduction to your school and your students so we have some context for this conversation?
Okay. Miller Elementary School is one of 11 elementary schools in the Burbank Unified School District. Our current enrollment for last year was 765 students. Of the 765 students, about 260, 34% of them are English language learners. We have pretty diverse in terms of languages. There are 20 different languages spoken in addition to English. We're a Title I school, and I know Mark had talked a little bit about that. So we receive funding, federal funding, to provide support for our students. Okay.
Yeah. And Debbie, I want to talk to you. You have brought the arts to your kindergartners. Can you tell me a little bit about the choice to do that and what you've seen as a result?
Sure. I came to kindergarten 5 years ago from the upper grades, where we did plays and a lot of visual and performing arts. And when I moved to kindergarten, I was told, not at our school, but other people said, well, you can't do those things with kindergartners. And I said, watch me. And so I, with the other teachers, implemented an Artist of the Month. So our students were learning about an artist, living and deceased, every month, and doing a project that was in the style of that artist. And then in my second year, because we have such a robust 4th and 5th grade art program, theater arts program, and we've been trying to develop our theater arts, that I took one of our children's book, Tacky the Penguin, actually 2 Tacky the Penguins by Helen Lester, and turned it into a script and performed it in the evening in May with my students. And my principal told the local paper that it would be an annual play. And so
No pressure.
so we've continued that.
And can you talk about kind of, it's one thing to have an idea to bring a play to a bunch of kindergartners. It's another thing to actually make it happen. Can you talk about getting financial support, kind of other support that you needed to make that reality?
Sure. I've always, whenever I've brought things to my students, if it's not afforded, if funding isn't afforded, then it just comes out of our pockets, my pocket. But we knew that we had received grants, our school, from Burbank Arts for All. And so I put in a grant with the hope that this would inspire other teachers at my site to continue and to jump in with both feet to the arts program. And so I put in for $400. I figured what was needed between costumes and props and everything, and estimated about $400. And you had to do, there was a place on the form for a matching fund where if you could actually have other funds. And I said, me. And so they took pity. And I received my first grant. And then the second year that I did it, I worked with a first grade teacher who said, hey, I'll do that with you. So we just wanted to really build our theater arts program and keep it sustainable, and which we've had 3 years now doing that with Burbank Arts for All.
And so now that we're talking about Burbank Arts for All, I'll turn to you, Sandra. For folks who might not be as familiar with the relationship between a foundation and funding a classroom like this, can you just talk a little bit about where your foundation gets its support and how you give it to teachers or school sites?
Yes, so Burbank Arts for All Foundation, we are a public arts education foundation, and we support BUSD arts education through 2 ways, through our grants and through our outreach and advocacy. And our grants are funded by our fundraising efforts throughout the year. We do a lot of fundraising, event fundraising. We have individual donors, we have corporate donors, a lot of community support funding our programs so that we can help fund BUSD's programs.
And it's not just financial support, but there's an advocacy component too, I believe.
Yes, so on the flip side of our grants, we also do a lot of advocacy and outreach to really share with the community what's happening in Burbank and all of the amazing arts programs that are happening in the classrooms, in the entire school sites throughout the district. And we do a lot of, we do these things called community exchange gatherings a few times a year, and we'll highlight different arts programs that are happening. A few years ago, we highlighted Miller's theater program and brought people into their auditorium to see what was happening. And we've done that at several elementary schools as well as middle and high schools. And we track policy, we convene people together to observe what's happening and what's the best thing to do. And yeah, any way that we can keep sharing the love of the great things happening.
And Judy, I want to turn to you now that we've kind of heard about kind of how that partnership worked in terms of helping fund that theater program, make that play possible. You're the principal, you have a lot of responsibilities, or a lot of things that have to get taught in elementary school. How do you keep the arts in there? Are there any challenges to that?
Lots of challenges. I think anytime you talk to a principal, they always say funding and time. Teachers are responsible for teaching the standards to our students. and for them to see, how can I fit this in? And I don't see it as that. I see it as, how can we integrate that? How can we take what you're required to teach the students and use that as a vehicle to help teach those standards? I didn't have a chance to mention to you, much of the success of our school has been because of we have such a well-rounded arts education program. As a principal, I just finished my 15th year, and
Congrats.
at the same school. And it's my 31st year as an educator, but I've seen firsthand over time how much the arts have impacted our students in a positive way. Things that you can't measure, things like building a student's self-esteem, teaching students how to problem solve. How about working together on a team or persevering when something gets really, really hard? Those skills that I'm mentioning, not part of the standards, but you would think, those things you have to take with you when they decide to go into the workforce, whatever they might decide to do. So I'm really fortunate because I work in a city where they support the arts. From city level to board members to superintendent to staff members at the district, and I'm really, really lucky because at our school, my teachers really believe that we can use the arts as a vehicle to teach not only the academics piece of it, but also the social and emotional, and that's really important, especially at an elementary level.
And I just want to kind of dive into that a little further because, when you introduced your school, you talked about how there are many languages spoken there.
Yes.
How have the arts, kind of in your experience, really helped those students or helped address that need or that part of learning?
Oh, okay. Yes, there's a saying that before a child learns to speak, they learn to sing. Before they learn to write, they learn to draw, and before they learn to walk, they learn to dance. So it's in our very essence as we grow that the arts are there. And so when we have students that come with no language, with no English, and they're picking it up from their classmates and the world around them, the easiest place to start is in the arts with movement and voice and drawing and painting. So it gives them a feeling of self-confidence and worth, and the language is just enriched within that. So if we get it early enough, if we start it at the TKK level and consistently give it to them, then their growth is enormous in that short period of time.
I don't know if you have.
I mean, I've been there at the school for 18 years. Well, it's more than that. It's 20, because I have 15 plus 6, I have to count, right? Let's do math, right? 21 years at the school. I was the assistant principal prior to that. I've had the opportunity to watch kids grow. So I get to see them in kindergarten, and I get to see them when they leave in 5th grade. I mentioned the fact that we have over 260 students who are language learners. So many of them don't speak the language, but to meet a student in kindergarten who is so shy and so scared, and to be able to watch a student in 5th grade, 6 years later, on stage and just lead role, audition for the part, and he or she, because I've had she's too, sit there and just, wow, different student than when they first started. To me, someone mentioned the fact that I think it's important for people to see how the arts impact our students. And I think when I first started this journey, I didn't see or understand, but when the first time I actually got to see a student who I met and barely spoke English, wasn't really wanting to speak to me or didn't understand, and wasn't able to communicate with me, and then as I said, 6 years down the line, he's on stage, and for me to stand back there, I'm always the person crying. I remember one time, some students said to me, "Are you okay, Miss Session? You're like tearing up." And I said, "I am." And the student said to me, "Are you upset or are you sad?" I said, "Absolutely not. I am so happy because I saw where the student started. And the fact that we gave the student the confidence to perform a hour and a half play in front of 200, 300 people, I could not have imagined that when the student started. So I think to see that and to witness that, that's why I keep doing what I do. That's why I feel it's important to integrate the arts for our students. I've seen it firsthand, and the academic piece of it is wonderful. Our school has been recognized for California Distinguished School, Gold Ribbon School. We were also in 2000 and, I have to remember what year it was, 2014 California Exemplary Arts School. So that's a really, that's not why we do what we do. That's the extra stuff. We do it because it's something that's important to provide our students. And I said to you, Carla, a student at this level, they don't know what they like or what they don't like. But as a principal, I have to provide those opportunities for him or her. They don't even know. Recently this year, a teacher came up to me and said, you need to come over here, you need to come over here. I'm like, okay, so we're outside. And we had hired a dance artist in residence, and she was really struggling. The teacher was telling me the student was just struggling academically, and she really was having a hard time with third grade. And she said, look, come over here, look at this. Look at her. She finally found something that I would have never even thought to provide for her. But the fact that we gave the student the opportunity to have 8 weeks of dance instruction with a professional dancer, I thought to myself, wow, that's why we're doing what we're doing, because maybe we have planted that seed that this student is going to continue with this, possibly dance down the line. I hope so. Despite the fact that she was struggling academically, she found something that she felt was important to her and that she wanted to try and give the effort.
And I want to pose a question to the three of you that's similar to the one that I asked Jeff and Lauren, which is, if someone cares about the arts or something being supported at their school, something they want to see, they hear this, they want this to happen for their students, what would you suggest is the way that they reach out to you as a principal or as a teacher or as a funder in the community to take an idea and to make it a reality? I can start with Sandra.
Well, one of the things we do is we work a lot with parents on being solution partners for our school sites, for our principals, for our teachers. Our educators are so hardworking and do so much for our students, and storming the gates is never the answer, but how can you help them as the educators, the experts in what they're doing, help them support what they're doing through the arts? And so we spend a lot of time helping parents understand what it means to be a solution partner and how they can do that. One of the things we've done through our advocacy and outreach program is we've built a parent toolkit that's very simple and lays out kind of the ecosystem of arts education in Burbank, and then gives easy, tangible, solution-based steps for any parent, depending on what level they're coming at it, whether they've never been to the school sites before, whether they've been a parent around for a while but haven't really connected too much, or whether they've been really in it. And the steps that they can take to reach out to their principal, reach out to the district's arts and CTE coordinator, reach out to their teacher and see what they can do to support so that everyone's working together and that the ecosystem is working cohesively to best support the students. Because at the end of the day, it's giving the students the best education possible.
And if you're a teacher that doesn't have access to a principal or an advocacy group that supports, you just kind of have to dive in and find what your passion is in the arts and go out there. Use the community. When I started, I connected with all the museums, MoCA, 24th Street Theater, the Skirball, Getty, and I found out about what education programs they had and what PDs they had for teachers. And so there are a wealth of resources to help with funding or to help with in-house residency. You just have to you have to kind of break out of that mold if somebody tells you you can't find a way to do it.
And then from your level, at the principal level?
Some of the best ideas have come from our parents. And I feel, and as well as my teachers, they all make me look so wonderful. But they bring the ideas to me and say, Judy, I want to try this. And I thought to myself, as a teacher, if you bring an idea to your principal, say, I want to try this. I just want to try it. I went to this class this weekend, and I just want to try it. And you know what? Invite the principal and say, come in and watch the thing. I'm pretty sure if you invite the principal in and see the excitement on the students' faces, and the fact that kids that you're trying to reach, and someone mentioned trying to reach those students that we have to, why can't we use arts as that vehicle? It is to have a student sit there and just read from a book. That's the old school way that I was brought up, okay? But to engage student in learning and using the arts as that vehicle, I think as a principal, as soon as you see that excitement on those students like light up, and they're finally, like it's a student, that you've known the student and they've not been engaged at all in the class, and suddenly you provide this opportunity for them, and suddenly they're interested in it. They want to try it. I think you see that, and I think that excitement will encourage principals to continue to do what we have done. We've been really lucky. As I said, I've had parents come in to me and say, hey, I have this idea, Judy, and they've done the work for me. They said, by the way, they all kind of know me, we actually went out and asked the artists to kind of give you an outline of what standards it's going to hit and what it looks like. Here's the syllabus. Well, you know what? I'm so busy. If someone does all the work for me and brings it to me, how bad is that? I'm happy someone helping that. And I think just working together as a partnership, we're really lucky. As I said, we're in a city where we have a foundation like Burbank Arts for All Foundation that provide those opportunities for our teachers.
I want to keep you all here for a second because one of the ways that we kind of prepared for this event is that we reached out to you and our listeners and our readers and asked what questions you have. And a couple of these I think are best answered by this group up here. Someone who chose to remain anonymous asked, how can we put arts education into school site plans? How can we show a correlation between arts education and student achievement? What markers can we look for? That feels like a question that's good for you, Judy. And then I'm just going to tag a little Carla question on the end of that, which is, and how does that relate to funding and supporting those things in the school site plan?
All of the schools should receive LCAP funding, and you as a principal have to decide with our school site council how you want to spend the money, and you have to tie that to academics. So it's so easy to tie academics to the arts. We mentioned theater. So if you're talking about a student who are language learners, how easy to connect those speaking and listening skills, the reading and writing skills to theater arts? They all fit in beautifully. You have to be able to see how you take those standards and tie that into the academics. There is the plan. I don't like the paperwork piece of it, but there is a way to tie that academic to the arts and use that. So it's a little tricky because it depends what funds you're using. Mark mentioned the fact Title I. You can use Title I to support the arts. It's just a little bit more challenging, but it can be done. The LCAP fund is more discretionary for us, so we can use that, but we still obviously want to tie it to student achievement.
Sure. So what I'm hearing from you is kind of do your research to tie it to the standards or to the goals in the plan. And then the other, I'm going to combine two questions here, one from Shannon, one from Kay, kind of talking about the community getting involved, kind of supporting. And this I feel like is a question for both you, Debbie, and Sandra, which is Shannon wrote in to ask about ways that there can be gifting or donating of items to support the arts so that money isn't the main currency or criteria in getting an arts education. And just to tack onto that, Kay asked about, performances already happening at local theaters or different things in the community. So I wanted to ask both of you in terms of what are ways that you found have been effective in tapping into what's already existing in the community to bring these experiences to students.
I'm just trying to think how to phrase it best. I mean, there's always a need for resources of all kinds. We get a lot of calls at the foundation office, wonderful community members who I have instruments that I'd like to donate, I have crayons and supplies, and our best way to help them is to steer them towards our district office. We have an amazing arts and CTE coordinator at our district office who has a tap on every school site in our district and what their needs are and who to reach out to and to really understand what supplies that they need, because a lot of things we fund are those basic supplies because they do all have a monetary value. So our community is really great at what can we do to help the schools? And that's one of the wonderful things about Burbank. But I'm not sure. Once it gets down to the classroom level, though, I'm not necessarily sure.
We find out our parents and what expertise they have. So we might have somebody that does set painting or can come in and help with art projects, clay, people that sculptors. I've had a parent that was an artist and came in and taught us how to sculpt. So it's really about going and seeking it out. You just can't wait for people to come to you. You have to ask to find out what's out there. And also, we happen to be in a town that is heavy in the industry. And there's some things that have happened, some partnerships, as far as trickling down to the elementary level. I think it happens more in, my perception is middle and high school, but there's no reason why it can't in the elementary, bringing the cartoonists in, bringing the filmmakers in, bringing musicians in. There's just a matter of how do we connect more so that we see the value of it at the elementary level as well.
Great, thank you all so much. Judy, I'll have you sit here. So on the theme of answering audience questions, I have a couple more prepared here, and I'm going to invite Mark and Lauren to come back up here on stage to help field them. But we just don't have enough room on the stage. That's why we don't have everybody up here. So, our other guests will also be available to answer these questions too. I did an event on arts and ethnic studies about a year ago now, and this is why this question jumps out to me. Lindsay wrote in and asks, how might schools, districts, and community arts organizations support high-quality arts education that sustains communities' existing cultural assets that are culturally sustaining or culturally responsive? So do any of you have examples of times where that's been done really successfully, bringing the arts in along with being culturally sensitive or relevant?
I can answer that. Our district is right on the border of Mexico, basically. We're 5 miles from the border. And we ask our communities, what is it that you want for your children? And a lot of them say, we want mariachi. We want our students to start learning the culture of our family and ballet folklorico and all of those different things that they sing at home, see at home. And so we do a lot of our professional development for teachers is centered around culturally responsive teaching. It's really important for us. We don't want to come in and say, this is what you need to learn. We want to hear what the families want our children to learn, and we want to provide them with the tools necessary to do that successfully. And we partner often with all of our cultural arts partners in Chula Vista, and we have a great cultural arts manager, Lynette Tessitore, who makes sure that if we're looking for something, an artist who is doing a specific style of sculpture, she says, hey, you want to have them come into the school? Yes, we want to do a PD with our teachers. We want to do it with our kids so we can continue those traditions and get our kids to understand their culture and heritage through the arts.
And is that supported through that, I think I was about to say 5 million, but like 7.2 million you were talking about that supports the arts in your LCAP, or is that something that you're getting grants or support from those organizations to support in the district too?
So the LCAP supports only our teachers' salaries. I'm scrappy and I make lots of great relationships with our partners, and because of the relationships that we've been building, they'll provide us something first for free, and then I'll go out and seek funding from foundations, or we'll write grants together. We just build really great partnerships just so they know, I don't have the money right now, but if we start working on something together, then we can start to figure out how we can continue this and sustainably pay for it. But we have a lot of great partners that will come in for free and say, we know what you're doing and we want to try to help you.
And they're like
Can
offering,
I just add
go
one
ahead.
thing? I really feel like we've got an urgent technology and diversity problem in California in arts education in terms of who are our arts educators are overwhelmingly white in a state where the kids are not. And our arts education is rooted in some kind of ancient traditions that have value, but you think of a kid today on their earphones on a bus to school, just immersed 24 hours a day in music. Why aren't more of them asking to be in our recorder program? And I don't mean that in a dismissive way about recorders. I started on clarinet, but I don't think we're necessarily asking kids, what's the arts education you want? It's a little bit more of this is the tradition that it's always been done. So choir singers in robes and kids on recorders and studying European artists for the most part, male artists for the most part. We've got to reinvent that quickly, and I think it's happening, but not fast enough. And I just want to underscore that's a great question and a great need. Otherwise, we risk the kids who are here today saying, we don't want what you're offering. That's not my arts education. And so for all our noble rhetoric about how important and valuable it is for student voice, I don't know that there's enough student voice in really telling us what they want and need.
Did you have any? Okay. The next audience question that I wanted to bring in is from Victoria on the theme of money, who asks, how can we ensure that budgets for the arts/music are non-negotiable and automatically included as a core subject? So we kind of have people at different levels who can address that. How can we ensure that budgets for the arts and music are non-negotiable and automatically included as a core subject?
Well, for me, I think as a principal, you have to put that as a priority for your school. And as I said, you have to see how that's important to help your student with their academics. So to see that tie-in, I put that money aside for performing arts every year. It's something that I've seen firsthand, as I said, the impact that it has on our students, and I know not to touch it. I know that. That's what we want. And every year I will take it to my teachers. Every year I will take it to my parents and say, is this something that you want to continue? And obviously overwhelming, they say yes. It's just not my decision. It's the whole school's decision, okay? I can't just sit there, okay, I want this, or one parent says, I want this. It's collectively us wanting the same thing for our students. And all of those groups have seen the positive impact that the arts have had on our students.
Something that we've done in our district is, because of the LCAP, we've taken our VAPA teachers, and during the time that our students are with the VAPA teachers, the classroom team, so the grade level team for fourth grade is meeting together during that 3 hours. So they have time to plan. They're looking at student data. They're targeting student groups and saying, okay, what can we do to support the students in this small group? And so we've been able to couple those together, and our superintendent is brilliant in this. It said, okay, you guys want arts education, you guys want planning time. Well, we want high quality arts education teachers in this position. So while you're able to plan and prepare, our students are getting a high quality arts education. And because of that, the union doesn't want to take away the planning time. So our VAPA teachers are going to be there as long as they get this planning time and the teachers still want it. So it's pretty brilliant to be able to keep that sustainable.
And I would just say that in a democracy, nothing's insured, and we're learning that at the federal government right now. Everything is at risk. So the only insurance we have is to show up and to vote. Show up at your school site, your school district when decisions are being thought about and made, and vote. It matters who serves on school boards and legislators and governors and so on. So the idea that we'll ever be done and we could just rest for the rest of eternity because it's all insured, I don't think that's ever reality. We need to remain vigilant on behalf of our kids.
Now that we've talked all about this from the state to the school, I wanted to share, when I tell people that I cover arts education, people will tell me that, oh, isn't that the first thing to go when money is tight? So now that we've had this conversation, I want to ask each of you from your vantage points, is that kind of mindset, is that true? What's your response to that thought?
I think it's a trope that we as arts advocates have become codependent on. And so I want to just scold everybody to let that go.
Get rid of it.
So many cultural organizations begin their fundraising letter saying, we all know the arts are the first to be cut, or we all know there's no arts in schools. Thanks to your donation, at least 3 children will have a violin and a chance to have music. And donors love that, and organizations love that. Schools love that when they're given a gift as a charitable donation. So we need to let go of that and say the arts are an essential part of a well-rounded education. But the good news is the arts are an enduring American value. This is not a new space-age thing that we're thinking about. And I tell people all the time, if you visit schools across Southern California that were built 100 years ago, why does Hollywood High School have 2,000 seats in their auditorium? Why does Van Nuys High School have a pipe organ in its auditorium? Why does Canoga Park have a ceramics room? That you don't have to be an anthropologist to know these things existed then. We found a way to pay for then. We need to get back to that now. What gives me optimism is so many people in this room in Chula Vista, in Burbank, in Mountain View, in districts up and down the state of California, the arts are on the rise. They're increasing investment, they're increasing opportunities. So the question is not, are the arts the first to be cut? The question is, how do we continue to sustain the positive momentum that's on its way? And that, again, comes back to showing up and voting.
And I also think it's shifting the narrative. If we keep saying the arts are the first thing to go, it's going to continue to be the first thing to go. If we continue to ingrain it and weave it into the fabric of every school community, it's not going to go anywhere because parents will show up. They'll say, you know what, this board member does not support the arts. We are going to make sure that we vote for the one that does. And I think that has to be shifting, that we want our children to have a well-rounded education. That includes the arts. That includes health and wellness. That includes, STEAM. That includes everything else that a child deserves the right to explore and learn throughout their educational experience.
Right, and as a principal, you have such a say in protecting that money. There's some things you obviously have to use, but you have, obviously, as I said, with parents and with teachers, you have a lot of say in how you want to spend that money. So I think people have said to me, how do I bring that to the school? And I will always say, start small. And it doesn't have to be the whole school. When we first started this journey at our school, there was 1 or 2 teachers. It's probably built, I probably have more than half that want to do a theatrical performance of some sort. Not necessarily the level of a whole thing in the evening with 4 months of practice and rehearsals and that kind of stuff, but even starting in the classroom.
Sure. All right, so my time asking questions is over. Your time begins now. We have mics in the audience. If you have questions for our guests about supporting the arts, please make sure they are questions. There'll be time later if you want to come up and just chat, but let's keep this to questions right now, please.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. What are the places where adults are currently getting their information about the arts currently? Is it primarily in these councils? Are there internet resources that you see are common? Where are they currently getting their information?
All right, so I'll expand that question to if you're interested in knowing about these things, being an informed person who goes to these meetings or advocates for these things, where do you suggest informing yourself? Sure.
What effective means do you see adults actually getting this information from?
Okay, there you go. What effective means? Where have your informed parents or your LCAP participants, where are they getting informed?
Birthday parties. Because the parents have to do something while the kids are running around, so they're talking to each other. I actually mean that. I don't know that we can scale that statewide. 2 things that I'm very involved in that I would just mention: the California Alliance for Arts Education, great web resource statewide. The LA County Arts Education Collective, which we mentioned earlier, is another great resource, and Denise Grandy, who heads that up, is here. Great to learn the bigger picture, but also sometimes there's information about a school district that is held outside of the district that gives you a different way in. I met with a parent recently from Glendale who wasn't aware of Glendale's history with the Arts for All initiative way back when, because as a parent, they're somewhat new in that district or their child is younger. So there's an institutional memory that sometimes can fade in a district. But things like the California Alliance for Arts Education, the LA County Arts Education Collective are great resources. And then the other is to ask, who's our point person in our school district for arts education? That varies widely in terms of what their title is. So I wouldn't worry about knowing the right title to ask for. Just that question, who's the point person for arts education? What's their email? What's their phone number? Does our district have a plan? How much money are we spending now? What's proposed for next year? Those are all great questions to ask. And the people who have those jobs, I think, are typically happy to do that and are looking for allies in the community. So in addition to the website, just a human-to-human contact with the lead for your district in arts education is really useful.
And Mark, I'll add on because I am that person for our district. Whenever parents call me and ask how they can learn more or if they can get some support, I'm always I always go out to our DAC and DLAC parent meetings and just kind of share a little executive summary about what's going on in the arts and how the parent support can also continue to support the arts in the schools. And then for your district, always look at the LCAP executive summary. And if your district isn't doing one, they should be, because you should be able to see exactly where all of that money is going and where it's prioritized throughout each and every section of the LCAP. And the arts fits perfectly in a lot of them. And if you're not seeing that as a parent, you're able to have that conversation.
I had a question about, Lauren, I appreciate the work you're doing in Chula Vista, and it's really a model, but you're talking about all of the money that you're using for LCAP to go into the art teachers in the schools. I'm wondering if you have a way to quantify what arts partners are also bringing into your district and how much funding they're bringing from outside foundations into that work.
That's a great question. We have one of our fabulous partners here, Adrian Valencia from Arts for Learning down in San Diego. We rely heavily on our arts partners, and I didn't have an opportunity to say that before, but we rely so heavily on them for professional development, for our VAPA teachers, for parents, for our classroom teachers. We also will have an arts partner that will say, hey, we just got a grant for $10,000 and we'd love to work with you. Guitars in the Classroom just came in and said, we've got 2 days of special ed training that we can give to any of your teachers in Chula Vista. That's $20,000 that they brought to us for free. And they gave every teacher a ukulele. It's amazing what our art teacher or what our arts partners can do for us if you ask. And like I said, I have relationships with every single arts partner in our community. We have relationships with 24 of them. And anytime there's something that comes up, they come to me because they know Lauren will know what to do with this money. Lauren will know what to do with this program. And we can't do it without them.
Can I just add a quick point on that? The world needs more full-time art teachers, and the world needs more community arts resources engaged. It's a both-and solution. In a world of scarcity, we often turn on each other and become competitors. And I just hate to see that more than anything. But we need to acknowledge that's an elephant in the room. That lone music teacher, not in Chula Vista, but in a community with far fewer resources, is often afraid that his or her job is on the line. And if some shiny new object comes in from outside the district that has a certain sex appeal, maybe they'll let me go and fire me and do that instead. That's a normal human response. So I don't want to belittle it, but we can't stop there. We need that music teacher, but that music teacher would be incredibly short-sighted to say, no thank you, LA Philharmonic. I don't want my kids to go to Disney Hall and see your concert. Or no thank you, Wynton Marsalis and the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. We don't want to have you come and visit. We need both. And we need everybody, the art teachers, to be more embracing of community resources and more nonprofit arts institutions to go to bat when the district is funding art teachers to say, even though that money doesn't help us directly, we're here to urge you to hire more band teachers or dance teachers, whatever it might be.
Good evening. Thank you for having this panel. I'd like to ask a question, elevating it to the state level, that we talked a lot about the school districts, the campuses, principals, and arts coordinators. Mark, if I can ask you a question in terms of all of us as tax-paying Californians, that how is our legislative body doing in terms of arts education in general? I know it's almost 60% of the budget. Can you give us sort of that top line about what we can do as advocates all throughout California on that, please?
Yeah, great question. I think right now we probably have the most supportive or potentially supportive governor, state superintendent, state board of education, state senate, state assembly that we've ever had, and the state is in a better cash situation now than it has been in recent years. Gavin Newsom comes from San Francisco, where he was mayor, and that city passed a ballot measure to target funds for arts and other important programs in schools. So the question is, what is our ask? The top 100 things that I want to ask for are better school funding overall. When districts are better funded, good things can happen, and without that, we're always kind of uphill. But many of us in the California Alliance is engaged in talking with the governor and his people about this disparity issue. Not that no one has arts education, because a lot of kids do, and a lot of districts are doing great work. But I would argue the kids in poverty who need it the most are getting the least. The state knows that. The state adopted art standards back in January of what kids should know in music and dance and theater, visual arts, media arts. It's a crime if we adopt those standards and know that some kids are receiving no instruction whatsoever that will prepare them for those standards. It's just a false promise. It's a joke. So governor, legislature, state superintendent, what can we do together to remedy that situation with an eye on the neediest schools and the kids in poverty? To me, that's the conversation California needs to have now. There's not a bill pending, tomorrow that we can get on, but that issue is one we can all talk to our legislators and governor about. It's more nuanced than nobody's getting the arts. That's not true. We've come a long, long way. But the kids who need it the most are getting the least. And I think that's it. Tell me more. What do you mean? What's going on? And I think that's where we need to engage in the conversation. We can't look the other way and watch kids in poverty be ignored in this arts conversation. They deserve that we do better than that. So to me, that's where the conversation needs to go.
So this is a question for Carla. I'm very curious to know how it is that KPCC has an arts education reporter, and I'm also curious to know what other like entities are reporting as effectively on arts education.
Well, thank you for that. I am the third in a line of 2 other reporters who have covered arts education at our station. I don't know off the top of my head how long that's been. As to how that happens, we are supported by some foundations that I will thank at the end of this event, so you can listen in for those. But you gave me a great excuse to talk about my mission here at KPCC. We do have an arts education reporter. We're very lucky. We have an education team of 4 people, me, higher education, K-12, and early childhood education. And we have these missions about how we cover what we decide to cover and what we don't cover. And mine is really, I'll just read it to you. Exposure to the arts can open doors to creative life, but not everyone has the same opportunities to be creative. I explore what's being done to address the disparity and who does and doesn't get to learn about and make art. So that's kind of how I look at the job of covering arts education. I don't know of very many other people who necessarily do it as their full-time job, but I feel very lucky to get to do it here and have conversations like this one. Thank you.
Hi. So my question is, and some of the panelists referred to it a little bit, but what is the role of arts and assessment? How do we assess the arts? Obviously, there are VEPA standards, but what are some examples of how the arts are assessed in the school? Does that help to bring in more money? It's kind of a big question, but I'm interested in examples of that.
No, I'm happy to. It's a great question. Things that matter in schools are assessed. Some in the arts advocacy world have this weird bias against it, like that'll just ruin it. There are no rules and so on. Then you think, well, how does the LA Philharmonic audition new musicians, right? Actually, they do it behind a screen, so they're not biased by what they look like. They don't look at each other and go, who am I to say what an effective violin player is? That's really, They have a very rigorous and very specific criteria in their mind. So the idea, my point is that rigor and joy are not mutually exclusive. And you can have rigor and joy go hand in hand. We ought to do a better job assessing student learning in the arts. Programs that I see do it well include the kids in that conversation. But I've adopted a rubric, and they put it on the wall like any other school subject. So our kids are going to do these shadow puppets, and they're going to have a little script, and they're going to read it. And the rubric is, did they speak clearly? Could we hear them? Did the story have a beginning, middle, and end? Whatever would be appropriate at that grade level. And the other kids are really, sort of authentic critics in a way. Without being mean about it, I liked their show, but I couldn't hear Johnny speak. That needed to be louder. And that's involving the kids in what quality looks like. So there are standards, expectations, rigor in all the art forms that don't block out creativity, but say there's certain elements of a good story, there's certain elements of an effective play, there's certain elements of playing music on pitch. And so we just need to remind people of that rigor, because one of the things that gets in our way is a sense, well, the arts, there's no rules, there's no standard, there's no rigor, it's just this wussy, mushy thing, that why would we invest in that? And we need to counter that and say, no, there is all kinds of rigor, let me show you, and demonstrate quality programs in action. But there are assessments. Other states are assessing the arts as part of their statewide assessment. The National Assessment of Educational Progress does a periodic assessment of 8th graders in all art forms. So there are existing assessments that I think are quality and don't take all the fun out of the arts, but speak to that rigor as an indicator.
And this is something we're also exploring in our district. We're TK 6th grade, so we're really trying to figure out how do you assess a kindergartner's ability to follow a rubric for creating a piece of art. How do we make sure that a child who's going up in front of their peers and doing a dance, are they just following the choreography? Are we measuring creativity? So it's something that we're grappling with in our district too, to see how do you really want to assess the rigor. Of course, you want to make it standards aligned. And I think what will help too is when the framework is ready to be rolled out for the state in the art standards, that should help.
That is a very practical note to end on, so I'll hold our conversation here. But I want to encourage y'all to continue the conversation with each other and with me. Like I said, I cover this at the station. I'd love to hear what questions you have that we should be reporting on in the future. I want to give a special thank you to all of our guests who shared their expertise today with us. I also, to answer your question, want to give a special thank you to the Rosenthal Family Foundation and the Albert and Elaine Borchard Foundation for supporting KPCC's arts education coverage. And I also want to thank all of you for all of your questions and being engaged in this conversation. I learned a lot from it already. I already have some ideas like stirring in my head. And I hope that we can talk again about arts education soon. Thank you so much.